Hey guys, Ellen here again today. I'm going to be talking to you about Quakers, or the Religious Society of Friends. So the Quakers are actually founded in England, like most of the religious groups that would actually end up moving to the United States and the colonies at the time, and face a lot of religious persecution. So their first leader, his name was George Fox, and he was the son of a weaver. But what makes him interesting is that he traveled around England on a religious quest, and during that period of time there was a lot of turmoil in England, and people really wanted the reform of the Church of England. But what he actually discovered during his religious quest is that he believed in the presence of God being found in each person, not in church. And this would actually come to fundamentally shape where Quakerism comes from and actually some of the belief systems that Quakers have. But in addition to this, Quaker actually comes from a derisive name given to Fox's group because they believed in trembling at the word of God. So that's where the idea of quaking comes from, or their name, the Quakers. They actually ended up adopting it as a term for themselves, but initially it was a derisive word given to them. They would arrive in New England in the mid-1650s, and what's interesting about their arrival in England is actually a woman would be their first missionary to the colonies. Her name was Elizabeth Harris, and she would visit Virginia and Maryland. But by 1660, more than 50 Quakers had made the journey. But that being said, they were very persecuted, specifically in Massachusetts. So something that we've seen before already in this course, but is kind of an interesting portion of Quaker history, is actually just how persecuted they were in Massachusetts. So we talked about the Boston Martyrs. So Massachusetts essentially passed this law after Quakers had come and had preached and had created a lot of frustration in this Puritan society. They passed a law that banned Quakers under penalty of death from Massachusetts. And why this is important is because two Quakers would then come to Massachusetts, William Robinson and Marmaduke Stevenson, and they would be actually hanged on an elm tree. So they faced a lot of persecution. They weren't the only ones who were persecuted in Massachusetts at this time, but they're two of the notable examples of just the extent to which this persecution actually went. But out of this, they would go to a new settlement that would be founded by William Penn. William Penn was the son of an admiral, and he actually became a Quaker in England, and he would be imprisoned for a writing that he had created that attacked the Church of England, but he would acquire land in the New World from Charles II for the debt the king owed his father. And Pennsylvania is kind of interesting because in its founding, it becomes a bastion for religious freedom, not just for the Quakers, who William Penn was a member of, but also just for any religion, and as long as the person believed in one God. So Mennonites would move there, some other religious sects would also move there, but a lot of Quakers would end up moving to Pennsylvania. Something that's also notable about Pennsylvania is that it was known for its fair treatment of Native Americans, which a lot of places in the colonies at this time period were not. And a lot of that does have to do with William Penn specifically and his beliefs as a Quaker. William Penn also ended up wanting to move to the New World because he really had lost faith in the ability for the Church of England to be reformed and the future of Quakers in England itself. And so that's why they ended up moving. Although William Penn himself would only visit a few times, what he created there was something that was very unique and something that would continue Quakerism in the United States because it created a bastion for this religious freedom. But also, we should probably talk about what makes Quakers interesting, right? So what makes Quakers really interesting is in a lot of ways they were very ahead of their time. They believed in the equality of sexes, races, and were pacifists. And they would create schools and adoption centers for Native Americans. And even in the 1780s, all Quakers were barred from owning slaves. So they had passed provisions before that, but they became avid abolitionists and avid pacifists even during these periods of time, with a lot of warfare and a lot of slavery that was going on. They also, in the 19th century, Quakers were the leaders of women's suffrage. So you've obviously got Lucretia Mott and Alice Paul as being two really notable ones that would end up being really important to the women's suffrage movement. But some other notable Quakers that are earlier in American history would be John Woolman, who advocated for peace and the abolition of slavery, and he would be known for being compassionate both towards slave owners and slaves. He also wrote Consideration of Keeping Negroes, which argued that slavery was an affront to common humanity. So you have these really early Quakers in the colonies that are passionate abolitionists before abolition really became something that was largely discussed. Another one of the well-known Quakers was Joshua Evans, and he actually was a critic of the developing capitalistic society as exploitative of slaves, Indians, animals and land. Let's talk about way before his time. These ideas would be something that, you'd probably see in some of the more liberal universities today, and someone who, was an avid Christian and also held these beliefs in a period of time where this was not the general sentiment of the people in the world. It's really interesting because it is so far ahead of a lot of the development in the rest of the world. He also believed that war was a symptom of alienation from God, and that luxury goods, tobacco, and rum continued the oppression of slaves and Indians. His golden rule, and it's just the golden rule in general, was do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and it would guide his principled positions. So Quakers, really interesting founding. They also were founded relatively near the actual founding of the United States and the founding of the colonies, but they also faced a lot of persecution for how little period of time they existed, and it's probably because their ideas were so radical. I hope that this gives you a really good idea of what Quakers kind of looked like and some of their notable people, but also I think that they're a really fascinating group, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks!